I do it at a deeper level. I do it at a level that I could not possibly explain to people. It's a very deep level of insight into things, and I figured out ways to handle things like.
Hola a todos, hi everyone. Welcome to MetaFit MetaMind podcast, a space where we leave taboo topics behind and dive into the interconnected worlds of physical and mental health and well-being. I am Carla Rodriguez, your host and trainer and coach of NLP and hypnosis, as we get on transformative conversations with leaders, entrepreneurs, and changemakers. Each episode is designed to inspire you to unlock barriers and embrace growth, mindfulness, and purpose in your life. Whether it's around mental health, wellness, or entrepreneurial journeys, we've got powerful insights just for you.
Being curious, being a lifelong learner, knowing just how to navigate and learning more.
And you need to tell the world that you are ready and manifest and visualize and become this version of yourself.
The real knowing of who I am has just begun. This was the light.
Like life is happening to me, but I am able to create the life that I want.
So subscribe now and follow the podcast to listen to these powerful stories and be part of this community of empowered individuals who are striving for greatness and legacy. Because remember, raise your voice, share your story. Make sure to connect with us on social media at MetaFit MetaMind Podcast, on my other page at Coach Carlita, and be part of our journey to inspire and uplift others. All right. Thank you so much for being back here at MetaFit MetaMind Podcast. I'm Carla Rodriguez, and I'm really, really excited to have this amazing, I want to say like genius guest on the podcast, Jim Marshall, who created a really cool system that we're going to get into later today. So thank you so much, Jim, for being here.
Thanks, Carl. It's good to see you.
And so before we even get into the nitty gritty, the juicy parts of what you're doing, right? First, I like to share with our audience and whoever's listening or watching, who this person is, who this amazing person that I brought on here is. And so my question to you is, who is Jim?
Well, the first thing I should say to give some context to your viewers is that I am the discoverer of hitherto unknown natural phenomena which greatly aid in the understanding of people, from which I created a revolutionary practical philosophic system called Septemics and published it in the book, Septemics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena.
That's super cool. And then you being the creator of that, tell me a little bit about, just so we can understand this journey, or what brought you to you being the creator of this phenomena, of this thing that helps people understand, right, different parts of their life. How did you even come to this, and how is it that even has brought you to where we're at now?
Okay, well, as far as the creation of Septemics, the story really starts when I was accepted into engineering school at the age of 16. Now, of course, at the time, I thought, like all the other students, that I would be working on physical things, such as airfoils and motors and electrons. But by the time I had my bachelor's degree, it was clear to me that I wanted to engineer the human psyche, because it is the area of greatest mystery, of greatest unknown, and more importantly, it is the area in which we as a race are failing miserably. 95% of the problems in industrialized society are because people don't understand people. Don't understand the wife, don't understand the husband, don't understand the boss, don't understand the son, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is a big problem. So to make a long story short, I had a long career as a human development engineer, where I worked one-on-one with hundreds of clients of every description for cumulatively many thousands of hours, and using engineering principles, engineering tactics, engineering strategies, engineering devices, engineering ideas, and so forth, to help my clients to attain higher states of ethics, responsibility, awareness, enlightenment, and so forth. Now, all of my clients benefited significantly from the work we did, but I started to notice incidentally that I could predict the outcome of the session. I never told this to anyone, but I made notes. And as the decades rolled by, it became obvious to me that the client would be at a specific level on a specific scale that I had previously observed and recorded. And as a result of our interaction, he would go to the next level up on that scale. Now, this happened thousands and thousands of times. And every time it did, it verified my hypothesis because the clients knew nothing about this. Absolutely nothing. They didn't know how I was thinking about this, what I was recording or anything. All they knew was they came to me with a problem or an unwanted condition, and I worked with them and it went away. So by 1995, I had simply observed and recorded about 32 scales.
Wow.
That varied in length between 3 and 7 levels. Now, around the same time, I was pondering a difficult case. And I realized one day that this client was at a level on a specific scale that I had not previously observed.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, I had this 6-level scale that I knew was correct by then. But then I realized, it has a 7th level. That's what I've been missing about this case. So as soon as I saw what the level was, I knew right away where to insert it. That was not a question. So when I inserted this 7th level into the 6th level scale, at that moment, it manifested mathematically.
Yeah.
And it went from being a line, which is what a scale is,
Mm-hmm.
to a plane, meaning a whole body of data.
Yeah.
And I looked at it, I said, whoa, I found something here. Because this had mathematics embedded in it in many different ways. There were all these intersecting mathematical components to this data.
Mm-hmm.
And now, having taken 26 semesters of math and having loved every minute of it, I can tell you that that is what math is for.
Yeah.
The whole idea is you start with a formula or an equation and you coax data out of it. That's how Einstein found E equals mc squared.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have data jump out at you like that you're not even looking for, that is a mathematical manifestation.
Yeah.
So I then said to myself, this has to be natural law, like, for example, a Fibonacci sequence, because of the math embedded in it.
Yeah.
But then I thought, I wonder how many of these other scales that I have are actually 7-level scales that had not been developed all the way. Because you have to realize I wasn't developing anything.
Yeah.
I was just helping my clients and making notes. So, knowing what I was looking for, I then studied and inspected all of these other scales.
Mm-hmm.
And in a short period of time, each of them developed into a 7-level scale. And when it did, it manifested mathematically. So now I had 32 7-level scales, all based on direct empirical observation, that all had mathematics embedded in them. And I said, whoa, this looks to me like a new subject. I went to school for 28 years, so I was a pretty well-read person. I never saw anything like this anywhere. So then I thought, wow, this looks like a new subject that could really help people if they were to study this. So in order to share with people, I would have to write a book. So the first draft of the book was completed in December of 95. And I then sent it to colleagues of mine, all of whom had graduate degrees in a variety of subjects. And they all loved it. They had different responses, but distinctly positive responses. So then I said, that verified what I already thought, which is this is a new subject that could really help people. And I have to tell you, that was 29 years ago. Since then, many people have read this book. I've been watching people respond to this for all these years. Nobody has ever said anything like, I don't get this, this doesn't make any sense, or anything like that. Nobody ever says that. What they typically say is, wow,
There's something different happening.
yes. So I then, starting in December of 95, when I got this response, actually it was January by the time I got all the responses, I then spent the next 25 years of my life working on this book. Because you have to realize, first of all, I had to discover the phenomena, and I already pretty much told you how I did that. But I did find 3 more scales as I was writing the book, which is why there are now 35 scales. Then I had to take that data and I had to use it to craft a workable philosophic system. Now you have to understand, I'm a dyed-in-the-wool engineer. When they gave me aptitude tests as a boy, the 3 top things were 3 types of engineering. So as an engineer, I went to a top engineering school. There were 2,000 engineering students, right? And we were all very much alike. I mean, one guy had blonde hair, another guy was tall, but other than that, we were all alike. So there's a certain such thing as an engineering personality. Now, we engineers are only interested in facts and results. In engineering, you're not allowed to say, whoops. You can't have the plane fall out of the sky and you say, whoops. Well, you can't do that. In engineering, and this is built into the subject. We have all of these things that we do, margins for error, that we make sure this is correct. It is empirically, observably, scientifically correct. And the whole world that we live in now is a world built by engineers. That microphone you're talking into is built by an engineer. Those headphones you're using, this iPad that I'm looking at you through. Okay, the whole world we live in, the refrigerators, the air conditioners, the cars, it's all engineering. So the only difference here is I use it on human phenomena.
Yeah.
So now, as an engineer, my task was to create something that would work all the time for every person. That took 20 years. Because you have to realize there are 35 scales, and each of them has 7 levels. And so that's
I think that's
200.
where I had the disconnect for a minute.
Okay. So that's what there are 245 different levels that I discovered.
Yeah.
Each of them had to be ascertained, verified, and expressed in a way that would make sense to people. So the most time-consuming aspect of this book was writing this in a way that would connect with the average reader of English. And I know I succeeded at that because I've been watching people get this for 29 years. You don't have to be a college graduate to understand this, okay? I went out of my way to make this accessible to the average person, including filling the book with glossaries. So I tell you the specific definition of the word that I'm using in that application. So there's no vagueness about this. So people get this. So for example, I'll give you some scenarios.
Okay. Yeah, because I was gonna be like, give me an example of
Yeah, like
maybe.
25 years ago while I was writing this,
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking to a friend of mine, 2 guys standing around talking about politics and government. And by then I had figured out the scale of government. So I said, well, I'm going to show it to him and see what he says. He didn't even know I was writing a book. He didn't know anything about it. So I just opened up the book. It was in a transcript form and I handed it to him. I did not say a single word. I just handed it to him. So he took it and he looked at it. And in about 1 second, he pointed to a certain level. And he said to me, there, I'm right there. He found his level on that scale without my even suggesting that that's what it was for. He didn't know that's what it was for. That's how easy this is to use. So, for example, what happens all the time is, let's say a guy's reading a book, right? And he's looking at, let's say, the scale of choice, right? And he gets down to level 5. And he gets down to level 5 and he says, wait a minute, this is my mother-in-law. This is exactly how she behaves. Just as it says in the book, this is exactly what she does. Now, I don't know this guy's mother-in-law. I probably don't even know the reader. There are people all over the world reading this book. I'm never going to know them. So how did I get it so exactly right that somebody can look at it and get right away that that's the description of this behavior? And the reason is it's natural law. So this is true. When I say this, I mean Septemics is true in the same way that the periodic table is true, in the same way that the Pythagorean theorem is true. It's natural law. These scales existed for at least thousands of years. And I just stumbled across them. Now you could say, well, how come you stumbled across them and nobody else did? And my answer to that is, well, how come Einstein figured out the theory of relativity in 1905 and nobody else did before that? Okay, how come Newton figured out the 3 laws of motion 400 years ago when nobody else did? That's what happens in discovery for people like me. You know, we study things in an analytical way. why is it that Nikola Tesla thought up the alternating current motor? Right? There was no alternating current. He saw it in his head. He said, I know exactly how to make this. And he went in 3 dimensions and built it to work.
Yeah.
And now everybody in the world uses alternating current. So it's the same question. All right. So I stumbled across this. The reason I stumbled across this is because of the nature of my work. I would observe my clients and I would see these phenomena. I would just record it. And they kept verifying it, because what would happen is I would see this phenomenon in a session, and then the session would end, and I would go out in the world to the bank or the supermarket, and I would see the exact same thing in the real world from people I wouldn't even know. So this is very well developed. In other words, it is as solid as a rock. I know for a fact that these scales are correct. Now, you might want to question how I expressed them, because writing is an art, right?
It is. Yes, it is.
So I say the scale of choice. Well, I had to select that word, choice. What's the best word to explain this scale, or the scale of attack? Okay, I had to find the right word. And I know I succeeded at that because people get it. People don't look at it and go, I don't understand this.
Yeah.
So somebody looks at this for the first time. I've been watching this for 29 years now, right? Some guy looks at it and says, oh, yeah, I see this. This makes sense. I get it. Because it's natural law, like the Fibonacci sequence. Okay? It's a real thing. So that's where this came from. That's how I figured it out. And after working on a book for 25 years, I was getting such consistently positive response. I said, well, I'm not going to live forever, so I'm going to publish it. And that was 4 years ago.
And so you went for it. And so what would you say? You are the one who stumbled upon it, as you said, right? What would you say? And this is just something that I just popped up in my head right now, is the commonality between, you and these guys, Nikola Tesla, and all these greats that, they essentially stumbled upon these things. What would you say is like that common thing there?
Well, there's several different answers I could give to that. There is a scale of thought. There are 7 levels of human thought.
Yes.
Not everybody thinks at the same level. So level 3 on that scale is analytical thought. And just to try to give you a frame of reference for that, there are 2 fictional characters that personify that. Mr. Spock of Star Trek and Sherlock Holmes. Okay? Those stories are all about the analytical thought of those characters. So if you watch Star Trek, the original Star Trek, right, all hell is breaking loose. They're about to get blown up. And Spock is not flustered. He just looks at us, fascinating. That was like a turning point in that series when they came up with that. And he said he used that word, fascinating.
Fascinating.
It was just fascinating. He wasn't worried about the fact that he was going to be blown to smithereens. He was just saying, oh, this is an interesting phenomenon that they have, So that's sort of how I am.
So would you say that you have to follow your intuition along that process? Because you have the logic.
It's not intuition.
No?
It's not intuition. This has nothing to do with intuition.
Okay.
So look, as I said, there are 7 levels of human. Now, the highest level is what we call knowledge. Okay? The word science comes from the Latin word scire, which means to know. So that is the strongest word we have. There's another word a little weaker than that, which is understand. That's not as strong as knowing. When you know it. Now, my favorite science fiction writer, Robert Heinlein, his most famous book is Stranger in a Strange Land, and he had his character, who was from Mars, speak the Martian word grok, which means to know in the fullest sense of the word. Okay? That is what we mean when we talk about knowing something. Like, for example, I know that the formula for a circle is pi r squared. Okay? Now, if you torture me, you could get me to say it's not true, but I would still know that it was true.
Yeah, you have the inner knowing.
Right. So that's beyond understanding. So understanding is a little less, but in order for me to create this thing, I had to know this is correct. But that's what engineers do all the time.
And you
That's what
said,
we do.
yeah, and you said that you're a human development engineer, so you were
Right,
already working with humans and their
right,
behaviors and their
right,
transformations. So you got to see a lot of this. So you knew, right? There was
right,
that knowing there already. It's what it seems like.
right. I observed it. You know, some people ask me sometimes about my beliefs. Do you believe this? Do you believe that? And almost every time I say, I neither believe nor disbelieve. I don't have anything to do with belief. Belief is only necessary when knowledge is absent. The acceleration of gravity, which is what we call 1g, is 9.8 meters per second near the surface of the Earth. Now, it does vary, you know, as you go higher up, it gets less. And
Uh-huh.
different places, you know, you might get 9.79, you know, but it's about 9 point. Okay. So that, I know that. That's not a belief. Okay. So if you ask me, who's the best guitarist in the world? That's an opinion. Okay? Some people are going to say it's Jeff Beck. Some people are going to say it's Al Di Meola. Some people are going to say it's Eric Clapton. That's fine. I don't care. Those are their opinions. Has nothing to do with engineering. But let me try to answer your question this way. As a human development engineer, I understand people the way an aeronautical engineer understands airplanes, the way an automotive engineer understands automobiles, the way a nautical engineer understands ships. Okay? If you talk to these guys who, you know, in these specialties, you'll find that they have like a very deep and broad and encyclopedic knowledge of their specialties. Anyway, the point is that that kind of answers your question about
Yeah.
my level of understanding because I used biofeedback in my practice, actual scientific phenomena, which was verifiable, quantifiable, and recordable.
Yeah.
So basically, what I did with my clients for 40 years was I used Socratic dialogue aided by biofeedback. So, for those of you who don't know about the Socratic dialogues, the central person in Greek philosophy is Socrates. We have pre Socratic dialogue, pre Socratic philosophy, and post Socratic philosophy. He divides that world in the same way that we have Jesus dividing before Christ and after Christ for thousands of years. Okay? It's like a central character. So his student Plato wrote something called the Socratic Dialogues, in which the protagonist is his teacher Socrates. And in each of these, Socrates is talking to a person or more than one person. And what he's doing is guiding these people to epiphanies, to greater understanding. So Socrates never told them anything. Like he'd say to the guy, what is ethics? You know, and the guy would go, hamana, like Jackie Gleason and a lot of movies, you know. So, and the guy would say, well, what about this? You see, and eventually does, oh, I see. That's the Socratic dialogue. Like there's, I think, a couple dozen
It's a
of them.
specific way of the way you use the language, but also the way you ask the questions,
Right,
correct?
right.
Yeah.
So I did not tell my clients anything
Yeah.
other than our next session is Tuesday at 2:00. That's what I told them, you know, or make sure you have lunch before you come so you're not hungry while we're
Yeah, or
working.
thinking about the food while
That's
you're
it,
doing
you
this
know.
work, for
But
sure.
once we get into the work, even if they ask me directly, like people often say, do you think I should divorce this woman? I would never answer that question. I would say, what do you think? Now, bringing in the biofeedback, that turned this procedure from a horse cart into a rocket ship because every time you think a thought, the electromagnetic field around your body changes. And this is A, scientifically known, this is not speculation, and B, it's easily measurable on an ohm meter because when they change, the resistance of your body changes, so we have a way to measure it. So I would bring the guy in for an interview. He says, will you work with me? Okay, come in and I'll talk to you, right?
Yeah.
So I have this guy on the biofeedback now, right? And we have a discussion. How do you get along with your father? How do you get along with your mother? Now, when I say, how do you get along with your wife? The meter goes, boom. Ah, we found something here. See?
Yeah.
He doesn't know.
Yeah, this seems very familiar to. I've seen a video around how our thoughts can in us observing water. I don't remember who the the genius behind this is. I call everybody genius who like discovers these things, right?
Uh-huh.
Where he is talking about how our thoughts can really impact how water moves,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
I think it was something about mind water connection or something.
Yes.
And I can totally see how that's very similar to that the biofeedback with our thoughts and
Right.
whatever transformation or change we want in our life.
And you have to realize how specific this is.
Mm-hmm.
So now we get in session. I say, tell me about your relationship with your wife. And the meter goes boom again, right? It's the same reaction. It's not a random reaction. It's the same reaction. Then he starts talking, and I start seeing an indication in the meter that he has secrets from his wife. The meter is telling me this.
Yeah.
Okay? So I say to him, do you have a secret from your wife? He says, how did you know?
How did you know?
And when I ask him that, what does the meter do? It goes boom. We're going down into the subconscious, and
Yeah.
the meter is guiding us right in there. Okay, just like when you have a jet landing, there's a guy on the field and he's waving the jet left. Steers him right into
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
the
Like
place
where to
where
go. Yeah.
right. That's what the biofeedback was doing for me.
So
So
are
this
you
was
saying that someone's language or their communication style, like it shows you or tells you where they are at in the scale?
Well, that's kind of a separate question, but let
Uh-huh.
me say this.
Okay.
People tell you their levels. When I say tell, I don't mean just verbally, although verbally is the big part, but the way they look at you, the way their body language, how they react with their emotions, they tell you their levels. So, for example, there's a scale of equanimity, right? So if I see a guy and he's all upset and yelling and saying dirty words and threatening, I know his equanimity is very low. Now, I
Mm.
haven't gotten to a level, but if I watch him a bit, I will. See, I say, okay, this guy is at this level of equanimity on this
Yeah.
scale. This is not debatable. It's like a tulip and a rose.
Mm-hmm.
Every tulip in the world is unique, and every rose in the world is unique. But I can always tell the difference between a tulip and a rose, and you probably can too.
Yeah.
It's not an opinion,
Yeah.
okay?
Just
This
is that
is a tulip,
knowing.
right?
Yeah.
Even if you don't know the word tulip, I mean, I'm sure the Chinese people have another word for it, but they still know this is a tulip and this is a rose in Chinese, right? Okay, that's what this is like. So let me give you a way of thinking about this so you'll understand it.
Okay.
Let's say you have a garden and you find out that I'm a gardener too, and you say, Jim, come over and look at my garden. I say, fine. So I go over to Carla's house, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I go into your garden and I look around and say, oh, Carla has hydrangeas, tulips, forget-me-nots, irises, peonies. Now, the reason I can analyze it that way is I know a lot about flowers because I've been taking care of them since I was a kid. Now, if you bring some 5-year-old kid into your yard, right, a little 5-year-old girl, right, she's going to see and smell exactly what I saw and smelled, right? But all she can say is, these are pretty and they smell nice. That's all she
Or
knows,
look at the flower. Yeah, flowers. Flowers.
right?
And they point out everything that's a flower.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the reason for that is she doesn't know the difference between a hydrangea and a chrysanthemum. Not only does she not know the name, she doesn't know how to take care of them. She doesn't know that if you're going to pick a tulip, all you need is a scissor.
Yeah.
But if you're going to pick roses, you better put on leather gloves before you do that, or your hands are going to get sliced up by those thorns,
Mm-hmm.
right? You have to know that.
Yeah.
So a little kid might, oh, I'm going to pick the rose and get cut. See, here's the connection to Septemics.
Okay.
Most adults are like that little girl except about people. They don't know what they're looking at, which is why in the United States, more than 50% of all marriages end in divorce.
Because they don't know people.
Right. They didn't know what they were looking at. They didn't know that this lady is a tulip and not a rose.
Yeah.
See, so that is why in industrialized society, most of our problems are because we don't understand people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, people don't necessarily know that they don't understand people.
Yeah, we're not
They
aware
might,
of it. We're like,
right.
I know, like, I always hear, or the generalization, right? Like, of, we know how women think, or we know how men think,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
That's like the
So,
most generalized one that you hear just anywhere.
look, I can tell you from working with hundreds of clients for 40 years, there are thousands of these generalizations. You know, one
Mm-hmm.
guy comes in and says, you can't trust women.
Mm-hmm.
That's a generalization. Now,
Yes.
if I got him to analyze his wife across these 35 scales, so he knows her level on every scale, by the time he finished that, he would understand her better than she understands herself.
Yeah.
And he would say, well, okay, there are some women you can't trust, but I can trust my wife. See? And then he might be able to analyze his mother. So, well, yeah, my mother really is somebody you can't trust. See? So he's parsing this.
Yeah.
It's not a generality anymore.
Yeah.
And that is a very big thing in helping someone to live, because when people have these generalities, it's a train wreck. I mean, think about Hitler's generality that Jews were bad and were responsible for all the ills of Germany, right? That's a generality, and it's false. Now, look at the horrible things that happened as a result of that belief.
Mm-hmm.
And his followers had the same ridiculous belief. So, if I could have got them to use this book on the Jewish people they knew, they could say, okay, this guy's this way, but this guy's this way. So Jews are not all the same. They're different.
Mm-hmm. Just the way that life and our earth and our history has taken us doesn't play out that way, but it was meant for you to discover Septemics, right? And discover all these scales and everything like that. And so you've done this work for so many years. You said 25 years, 1995, right? And you've done this more than 20 years. What would you say has kept you motivated throughout this process to eventually finally writing the book?
Well, let me explain this. I have no memory of a time in my life when I was not intensely interested in learning everything taught in every university. Now, of course, that's impossible. Nobody could live that long. Even if you lived 500 years, you couldn't do that. But the impulse is there. In other words, I want to know. I was one of those irritating little kids who was always asking questions. Like, I can remember when I was 3, I was listening to records. This is before even CDs, and I was listening and I was thinking about this. So I went into her. I said, "How do you get the man's voice into the record?" See, that's what a natural engineer would want to know. How do they do that?
You've always
No,
wanted to know the process.
right.
Yeah.
But I was like that with everything. How does a refrigerator work? How does a radiator work? How does the car work? Why is it that when you turn the key, the car starts? How does that work? What's going on? So this motivated me.
Mm-hmm.
So I loved school. I was a genuinely enthusiastic student. Every day, starting when I was 3, I went off to school and I was thrilled to learn whatever they were teaching. And it didn't matter what the subject was. Okay, that's enough arithmetic. Let's do geography. Okay, great. Let's do geography. So that's just who I was, which is why I went to school for 28 years. And I was a scholarship and honor student at every level because of that. You know, sometimes people, when they hear about all the scholarships I won and everything, they say, gee, you must be very smart. And I say, well, I don't know that that's what it is. It's just that I was conscientious. There was never a day when I didn't do my homework. That never happened. I never skipped school. I would even lie when I was sick and say I wasn't sick so that I wouldn't miss school.
Oh, wow. You're definitely the one that was meant to find this because you seek that knowledge, which is so powerful.
Right. You know, one of the big turning points in my life, I can still remember clearly, is when I first discovered that some children didn't like school.
Mm-hmm.
That was like, how could that be?
Yeah.
So I'm at the chalkboard with another boy, and we're doing division on the chalkboard, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he made a comment that I didn't understand. I said, wait a minute, let me get this straight. You mean you don't like school? He said, no, I hate school.
Yeah.
I said, whoa, what a concept. Now I understand some of these students better. I just didn't understand people who didn't pay attention, didn't do their homework, or cause trouble. I didn't understand. I just didn't get it.
You didn't know the
Oh,
behaviors back then.
they don't like school. So, I just continued to love school, continued to study. I was just a very conscientious
Yeah.
student. And you might say compliant. I was compliant. In other words, if the math teacher said, now I want you to go home today and I want you to solve all the problems on page 17,
Mm-hmm.
I would do it. I didn't get down to number 10 and say, oh, well, Star Trek is on, I'm going to stop.
I'm
That
gonna
didn't
miss
happen.
my show.
Never happened. So eventually I became a polymath. Polymath is someone who's learned in multiple disparate subjects. If I were not a polymath, I would not have recognized Septemics for what it was. I would have just saw these phenomena and it wouldn't have made sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because my expertise includes psychology, philosophy,
Mm-hmm.
theology, parapsychology, science, engineering, mathematics, law, literature, history, metaphysics, military science,
Wow.
political science, physical culture, education, human potential, organization, and music.
I have a true genius on the podcast.
So,
At least
so
my opinion.
all of this eventually, not while I was studying it. When I was studying political science in college, okay, it's political science, but eventually, all of this coalesced in my mind to one big thing. And so when I saw Septemics, I could see it from all of these angles.
Yeah.
I could see the math in it. I could see the engineering in it. I could see the history in it. And if you read the book, you'll see all of these things come up. There are references to military science. There are references to political science. There are references to education. All these subjects that I knew as one big blob in my mind are built into this subject. What I should do now, if I may,
Sure.
is tell you the names of the 35 scales
Yes.
so that your viewers will know exactly what subject matter is addressed in the book.
Okay.
Okay?
I'm ready.
Of the 35 scales, 24 of them I call individual scales, meaning they apply to an individual. And 11 are called group scales, meaning they apply primarily to a group. These are the individual scales. The scale of basic purposes, the scale of personal influence, the scale of choice, the scale of permeation, the scale of thought, the scale of identity, the scale of evaluation, the scale of motivation, the scale of control, the scale of stopping, the scale of scholarship, the scale of literacy, the scale of human ability, the scale of memory, the scale of spiritual identity, the scale of mental deletion, the scale of aberration, the scale of physical fitness, the scale of justification, the scale of belief, the scale of equanimity, the scale of attack, the scale of conflict, and the scale of reaction. And these are the group scales: the scale of relationships, the scale of life spheres, the scale of government, the scale of civilization, the scale of survival, the scale of management, the scale of exchange, the scale of communication, the scale of allegiance, the scale of sexuality, and the scale of politics. Any one of these scales by itself could dramatically change the life of the person.
Yeah.
Right? So you could take the scale of motivation and you could, if you want, ask yourself, what's my husband's motivation toward me? What's my boss's motivation toward me? What's my sister's motivation toward me? What's my grandmother's motivation? Now, every time you get a correct answer, you start, oh, I see, my husband's motivation is level 1, love, the highest motivation of all. See,
Yeah.
you will have an epiphany. You'll say, oh, that explains this, and this. Every time you get a correct answer, you get a realization.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
you could take this one question, what is this person's motivation? And use it on everybody you know and everybody you have ever known. So you could use this one scale, this particular way, 200, 300, 400, 500 different ways, depending on how many people you know. And then you could reverse the deck and say, what is my motivation toward Fred? What is my motivation toward Mary? What is my motivation toward Uncle Joe? You see? And you could use it again another 200, 300, 400 times on that vector. And every time you spot it, that's my motivation toward Mary. That explains why I did this and this. See, you have an insight. So by the time you finish this exercise, you would have had maybe 500 or 600 or 700 insights.
Yeah.
So you're actually a smarter person.
That's really cool. And I'm just wondering here, would a good way, obviously getting the book, reading the book, but would a good way to figure out what scale we need to work on would be that first question that we have, like, what is my motivation, or what motivates my husband, or does he get motivated? Like, does it come from like those first questions that we're like, I feel like there's something here, and then you can go and explore that specific scale?
Well, the last sentence you said is exactly right.
Okay.
Go and explore the specific scale.
Yeah.
Okay? So let me give you an example of how to use this.
Okay.
Let's say you have this friend, Carmen.
Mm-hmm.
And every time you talk to Carmen, she complains about her husband. Right? This is a never-ending thing.
Mm-hmm.
My husband is driving me nuts. Well, why? What's he do? And she's blah, 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 blah. Right? She's got a whole list of things, complaints, right?
Mm-hmm.
So after a while, you get tired of listening to this, and you say, Carmen, come here, let me show you this. And you open the book to the scale of relationships.
Got it.
Now, she can read English, so she looks at it, and she will say something like, you mean there's a scale of relationships? You say, yes. This relationship that you have been complaining to me about for 6 months, where is it on this scale?
Mm-hmm.
Guaranteed she's going to want to answer that question because she's having all kinds of trouble.
Yeah.
And you're opening a door for her. This is a new idea. Let me look at this.
Yeah.
Now, what's going to happen is she knows the relationship, right? She's been living in it for years.
Mm-hmm.
Once she looks at the material, in a matter of seconds, she will find a bracket. She will say something like, I can see right away. We're definitely not at 1, 2, or 3, because that's the top of the scale. We're having a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
So see, she got it down to 4.
Yeah.
In like
That's
25
so interesting. Yeah, it's like let's go explore this, and then even though you're an engineer and you are like how did this happen, and you're very detailed and very process oriented, it seems like the scales, which I find very interesting, because it's not that it's the opposite, but it's like I can be curious and go explore this, and it doesn't
Yes.
have to be in one particular order.
Right. It depends on what's going on in your life. So
Yeah.
now she got it down to 4, and you say to her, why don't you just read the text?
Mm-hmm.
And you get it exactly.
Yeah.
I guarantee she's going to want to do that because she's already starting to unravel this.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
So she reads it, and you could help her as a tutor.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
So now she goes back, and you say, all right, now tell me, where is this relationship on this scale? She says, well, now that I read it, I can see we're at level 5. That's not so good. That's near the bottom of the scale. No wonder we're having a lot of trouble. This explains X, Y, and Z. She's having an insight.
And this journey, Jim, that you've been on over 20 years, since you were a kid, being the curious, the question asker, that correlation between mental and physical health, even emotional, and you can include all your skills in that, right? How does that play out in your life, or has played out in your life overall, or even in your relationships with yourself and with others?
You mean my inquisitiveness?
Sure.
Okay. Well, as a student, it just made me a great student. Today we're going to learn about the sine wave. Really? Hit me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm all in. See?
Yeah.
I was not there saying, I want to get out of class and go call my girlfriend. No. So as a student, it was a very good thing. But I have to say, interpersonally, it did create some problems.
Mm-hmm.
Because even as a very small child, I was always the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
Now, when I was a kid, I was not smart enough to conceal that. By the time I was a teenager, I learned to shut up, keep it to myself. Like, and not say, you mean you don't know the Pythagorean theorem? It's so simple, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I stopped doing that, which was something I would do when I was, 5, 6, 7, That made people not like me. They did not want me around. Get rid of this kid. He's a weirdo. So I learned to shut up about that and sort of conceal how much I knew. So that became a way of life. So there was always my having impressions and calculations and knowing exactly what was going on and not saying, which is not a great place to be all the time. And you have to realize that as a human development engineer, again, I'm not telling this guy. I would know how the session was going to come out, but I wasn't going to tell him that.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to bring him to a realization himself.
You would ask the questions that would
Right,
guide him.
right. So the guy first comes in, right, I interview him, right? Never really interviewed him before. And I said, okay, tell me what's going on, right? And I just asked general questions. I can figure out right there that his wife is a Looney Tune. She's at or near the bottom of many of these scales.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that. I already know that. But I'm not there to be the arbiter of anything. I'm there to guide him. How did that work out for you? So, again, that's part of the same thing. It's being in possession of a vast amount of knowledge and not letting it out.
Very inquisitive. You're very wise. You're very knowledge filled, and you have all these studies under you. So this human nature of us though still feels, we still have those emotions and those challenges and the frustrations and stuff. So you being so knowledge filled, like I said, how do you balance the more nature filled part of us?
You mean in my own life?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I should tell you that I've been meditating for over 40 years. So, every meditation that I've ever had has led to realizations.
Mm-hmm.
So now, after all these years, I'm better at it. I'm faster at it. I do it at a deeper level. I do it at a level that I could not possibly explain to people. It's a very deep level of insight into things.
Mm-hmm.
And I figured out ways to handle things. Like, for example, I had a teacher in elementary school who hated me. This is not an opinion. She was vociferously opposed to me from day one. And I had her for 3 different grades.
What?
This was a traumatic experience. And she would do horrible things to me. She would do things to me that in today's world, she could have been sued for, or maybe even arrested for. Okay. Now, when you have something like that going on for 3 years, 3 different, the 2nd grade, the 5th grade, the 7th grade, it's like that was a major thing. Tony Curtis, the famous actor, did a movie called Some Like It Hot, in which he did a romantic scene with Marilyn Monroe, where they're on the couch and they're kissing, right?
Okay.
So when the movie was done and they brought in all the actors and they showed it, right? When the lights went back up, he stood up and he said, it was like kissing Hitler.
Oh, wow.
And there were 100 people in the room who all heard this. That's what he thought of Marilyn Monroe. You have to realize he's a Jew.
Yeah.
His real name is Bernie Schwartz.
Yeah.
So that's a big, right? But he still did it. He still did his job and got paid millions of dollars for it, right? Okay. So that's the way I felt about this teacher. She would show up in a meditation and I would know exactly how to make it go poof.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Out of my mind. So there's a whole scale about this, which I mentioned, called the scale of mental deletion. You can actually delete parts of your mind if you know how to do it. And I've sort of been moving up that scale and getting better and better and better at it.
Yeah.
So I've been able to deal with these things in a very effective way.
And so
the
meditation
result-
has grounded you while like mentally deleting those parts that were traumatic and challenging in
That's
the
right.
past.
Right. So now, as the years went by, I've gotten to a point in my life in recent years where I simply don't get upset or worried or angry or frustrated or anything. It just doesn't happen. And if there is a moment where it happens, I'm not saying I express it, but I feel something, I have my meditation done, or nothing sticks to me. So, for example, I have a cousin who I grew up with. We lived nearby one another, and we were like brothers. You know, we did all the things that boys did in those days: electric trains together, sports together. We were in the same boxing club. We played in a band together. We went to parties together, you know, right? And this guy was just a wonderful, wonderful. I love this guy, right? Some years ago, he was murdered. He wasn't going after him, but a bullet came right through the wall and killed him.
Wow.
So everybody in my family was hysterical over this. I did not get upset. Doesn't mean I don't love him. Doesn't mean I don't miss him. And I had very positive things to say about him to all the other people. But I just don't have that anymore. So, you know, like when my mother died, I was not upset. I just coped with it because I learned how not to react to things. There's a scale of reaction, and there are 7 levels of reaction. Well, I just learned how to get to the top of that scale. I just don't react. You know, if somebody comes to me and says, you're blah, blah, blah. I say, okay, why do you think that? Thank you for telling me. Very interesting what you have to say. I'm not upset. I'm not saying that I feel something inside that I don't show it. I just don't react. There's no reaction.
You just know how to handle it, or how to observe it maybe, and
just how to
do
not
what
react.
you need to do with it after.
A reaction is something you do. Right? Somebody says, rah, 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 rah. You say, oh yeah, I'm punching him in the nose. Right? When I was
like
a little,
it's that
when I was a
thing
little
that we're
boy,
not even thinking about.
When I was a little boy, that's what happened. You know, when I was a kid, it was considered normal for boys to have fistfights. Normal.
Yeah.
And that's changed. But in those days, that happened all the time. The parents didn't care. The teachers didn't care. The police didn't care. Even the other guy didn't care.
Yeah.
It was just like a way that we communicated. Now, I can remember a cousin of mine said something about my mother once. I had him down on the ground and was rearranging his face. His father pulled me off him.
Yeah, there was a reaction there.
Right. That would never happen to me now. Doesn't matter what they say about me, my son, my mother. Don't care. It's just people can say whatever they want. It doesn't matter. Now, if people do bad things to me, like I've had people commit crimes against me, I'm not happy about that, but I still deal with it with aplomb, you know? So I call up the police. If somebody broke in, they stole something, I made a report, not upset, you know, and just go to the next thing. But that's from the meditation.
Yes. That's so
I have to
powerful
say,
that you've been doing that.
The 28 years of formal education fed into the meditation, and the meditation fed into the education. There's like a feedback. So those are like 2 things that I had going for me that most people don't. And again, with the meditation, you know, I meditated on a daily basis for over 40 years. I mean, not many people do that.
Nope.
There were times in my life when I would meditate like 8 hours a day, when I was really getting into, whoa, this is big. I can get rid of this stuff. So now, you know,
so powerful.
For me now it's like 40 minutes and it's like, whoa, you know, I'm way up. So in a good way. That's sort of the answer to your question.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just don't react. And I learn, you know, from the meditation, what goes on in the mind, what's in the subconscious. You know? Because when this horrible teacher said, mean, insulting, defamatory things to me in front of the class for no reason that weren't even true, it bothered me. I was a kid. Now, it doesn't bother me at all. It doesn't bother me if it happens now, and it doesn't bother me what happened back then. It just doesn't, because I've learned a lot and I have an understanding of who I am and what I am and how to behave. The big thing is not to react.
Yeah.
The main way that people get into trouble is they react. We had
I
a
tell my
situation.
clients that because I'm not, I meditate here and there, but not like you on a daily basis. But I've learned along this process of me learning and gaining more knowledge is that I just ask myself, how can I respond versus react?
Yes.
Because I feel like I can respond to something in some sort of way. And there's moments when, yeah, I still react because there's still a lot of work for me to do.
Mhm.
But I try to think of, I work on remembering that question: how can we respond to this situation, to this
That's right.
circumstance, to this feeling, versus the reaction that doesn't necessarily give us the results that we want, whether in life, relationships, business, entrepreneurship, all the things.
That's right. You're very smart. Doesn't give you the
Thank
results
you.
you want. So when, like if somebody says to me, rah, 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 Donald Trump, rah, 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 I'm not going to get mixed up in that. I respond, well, thank you for telling me that. Well, why do you think that?
Mm-hmm.
Or
Yeah.
well,
Let me learn from you.
it diffuses the whole thing
Mm-hmm.
because you're willing to. So, I have been around and I've been around some dangerous, scary people. And I learned as a child how to handle this,
Mm-hmm.
how to communicate in a way that you don't wind up in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this part of that I learned from my father because he, being much older than I, grew up in a world that was much more violent than the world we live in. And but he learned how to be diplomatic, how to be calm,
Mm-hmm.
how to address the situation. And I learned from him because then, see, I would talk to him and I would find out he was really angry at this guy, but you would never know it. You would never know it. He just dealt with it with aplomb in a way that was sensible. And I'll give you an actual story. My father had a friend who was a friend of the family, so I knew this guy since I was a baby, right?
Yeah.
Of course, they would come over to our house, we would go over to their house, and they were in business together because my father was a businessman. He had all kinds of business deals going. Very shrewd person. So I found out that, because my mother told me, that this close friend had been cheating my father out of money in their business practice.
Wow.
Father found out. And so my mother said to him, well, are you going to bring this up with him? He said, no. She said, why not? She said, well, if I bring it up with him, I'll lose a friend. So it's obvious that these people were good friends.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't want to lose a friend. He just didn't say anything about it, even though he knew all about it. See, that is a very strategic way of handling a situation rather than. So the most famous example of this in recent memory is, in case you haven't noticed, Zelensky goes to the White House.
Mm-hmm.
And he's in the White House talking to Trump. Did you see this? It was on TV. Everybody
Yeah,
saw
yeah,
it, right?
yeah.
And
I've been
he
seeing
wound
clips of it.
right. So
Yeah.
he wound up insulting Trump, insulting the vice president,
Mm-hmm.
speaking over them. You don't speak over the president of the United
All
States.
right.
In the White House, if Trump is saying something, you shut up and you listen.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if it's Obama, if it's Clinton, doesn't matter. But this dopey guy was not sophisticated enough to know this. And Trump wound up having him thrown out of the White House.
Yeah.
They had planned a whole luncheon they were going to have together, and talk about the deal and everything. No, he threw him out. So the guy realized he screwed up. He came back, kind of apologized,
Yeah.
and the deal is going forward. But that's a perfect example. You could
Yeah.
see, if you watch this, that this guy couldn't control his temper, couldn't control his body language, couldn't control. He did not know how to be congenial and diplomatic with the most powerful people on earth. So, if I were talking to Clinton or Obama or Bush or any of those people, it's not that I agree with everything they do. I don't. But it's President of the United States. It's like when you talk to a cardinal or a bishop. He's an authority figure, or the Pope.
There's something to learn from each of them, no matter who it is.
That's right. And there's such a thing as respecting the office, respecting the authority. So that's an important thing to know. And that's where you respond. And Zelensky, instead of responding, was reacting. We were attacked,
Definitely.
and they killed all these people. That's not what he should have been saying. We already know all that. We know what's been going on over there for the past 5 years. Yes, they were attacked by the Russians, but that's not the time to bring it up. Now, maybe if you got off the camera and in a closed office, you might say, Mr. President, I want to point out this, and this, and you should keep that in. That's not what he did. He's in front of the whole world, made a fool of himself.
Yeah. And then, the results showed pretty much immediately
Right.
that reaction.
Right.
And this is on a big scale. Imagine like the everyday people
That's
reacting
right.
all the time. And I know I work for a nonprofit, so I speak with inmates all the time. And a lot of these cases that I read and stuff, a lot of it I'm pretty sure is from reactions. I see, family violence and this thing that happened out in the street, and it's just so interesting to see how a lot of people end up in these situations because
Right.
of the reactions in
Right.
personal, even for myself, right? I've reacted before and it has not ended well.
That's
And
right.
it's part of
It
my
never
it's part of
ends
my
well.
human nature and what I'm learning along the process, right? But from the reactions, I'm like, oh, that did not feel good. Oh, I
That's
hope they don't
right.
hate me for that. And I have then all these stories that
Right.
can be created in my mind, right? And so, yeah, it's being very aware of those reactions. And when we have reacted, what can we learn from each of those?
Right.
Because it could be different next time.
That's right. So I mentioned before my knowledge of law. I'm not a member of the bar, although I would go into court and the judge would assume I was a lawyer.
Yeah.
And I would have to explain to him, no, Your Honor, I'm not a member. Because I don't want false pretenses. I want to be open, full disclosure. I'm not a member
Yes.
of the bar. Okay. But I would go to court and I would win going up against a lawyer. And the main way that I did it was, number one, I was not only respectful to the judge, I was respectful to opposing counsel. If the judge ruled against me, I just said, okay, it's fine. And I would watch people in court, because, when you go to court, usually there's other cases before, right?
Yes. A whole
On a
bunch of
docket.
dockets.
You're on number 6, right? So you have to listen to 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, because they tell you to be there at 9 o'clock. You better be there at 9 o'clock.
Yes. Yeah.
So they don't hear you until 11. But so I've heard hundreds and hundreds of cases. Okay, because if somebody screws me, I bring a lawsuit against them. That's what you're supposed to do. You don't beat them up. You don't threaten. That's illegal. Okay, what's legal is you go to court, you bring your evidence, you testify truthfully, and I win, and I win, and I win. And some of the smart people I've dealt with, I confront them with these facts and with my evidence, and they say, you know what? We're going to settle with this guy because he's going to clean our clock in court. Just not long ago, my house was wrecked in a storm, and my insurance company refused to pay me. So I hired an attorney, and I was deposed and everything. And I'm sure the opposing counsel could see, even though they're arguing against me, they're going to kill us in court, and they settled.
Yeah.
I got all my money.
Yeah. So
And they wound
up
up losing a lot of money, because not only did I get all the money that was owed to me, but my lawyer had to be paid too, and all the expenses had to be. They had to pay their lawyer, so they wound up paying 3 or 4 times as much.
Yeah.
As if they had simply paid me when I originally said to them, "This is what happened. Here are the photographs. These are my witnesses. They should have just paid me." Okay.
There's so much I could say about insurance companies because they didn't have my mom either, but I'm not even gonna get into that.
Yeah.
Because I could react. Yeah, so it's really interesting how you use the Septemics and how you apply it into your life. And yeah, like I have your book actually in my cart ready to like get it. Because I want
Right.
to figure out how I can implement it, for myself, and how I can just share like, hey, yo, this is like a really cool way to like apply this. And so is there anything that you have coming up for you? Because I know you have your book, right? Which give me the title of your book so everybody can hear
Okay.
it.
It's called Septemics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena.
There, powerful right
And,
there.
and I'd like to invite your viewers to my website,
Yeah,
which is septemics.com.
and it's Septemics.
Right. Where you can see what many readers have said about it, what many journalists have written about it, what the reviews are. You can read sections of the book itself. And there's this, as you mentioned before, I pre-recorded Introduction to Septemics
Mm,
that you can listen to that explains it to a new person in 15 minutes.
yes. So go check it
So,
out.
yeah, I want to just say one thing to
Yeah.
sort of bring this into focus
Mm-hmm.
for your listeners. The data in this book is vital for every person and can help you to achieve your goals faster and easier by explaining what might otherwise seem to be inexplicable or random.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I'm gonna leave it right there because there's no need to complicate it anymore. It just go listen to the audio. It's like a good way to like understand what it is, like on a beginner level. And then go and get the book, septemics.com. I literally am talking to the creator, the founder, the genius behind Septemics, Jim Marshall. So thank you so much here for giving me like this, like in a way, a masterclass. I get to hear it firsthand in a way, right? So I get to win here. So I so appreciate you and having this ability to share so much knowledge and wisdom, and like even like aha moments for me of like, oh, okay, oh yeah, that makes sense. So thank you so much for being on here, and I so truly appreciate you being here.
You're welcome.
All right, that was a masterclass, a huge episode filled with value, filled with so much like, I need to go check that out. I need to check in with myself. I need to become aware of where I am at with my life, with myself, with others. And something that really stood out for me in this conversation with Jim was a reminder that awareness, right? I just mentioned awareness always comes before reaction. It's so easy to respond to life from old patterns, especially when we feel triggered or misunderstood, right? But when we give ourselves that moment to pause, we create space to respond instead of react, right? There's a difference. And in that space, we reclaim choice. One of the things that I tend to tell my clients and my students is that be aware of where you are at and cause versus effect, right? Cause, you taking action, you being in the place of choice, versus effect is you're in a place of reaction and the whys and getting into that rabbit hole. So become aware of that and take responsibility of that. And in that space, right, again, we are reclaiming that choice. The second thing I took away from here is that growth doesn't mean being ahead of anyone else. It literally means understanding where you are and learning to navigate from that level with compassion. Because when you start to see others through that lens of awareness, everything shifts. It becomes less about control and more about understanding. Jim has devoted over 50,000 hours to studying human potential and development. He is a true engineer and he's a true curious person in this, right? He's the author of Septemics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena, which explores how we can measure and elevate human awareness. And you can learn more about his work at septemics.com and connect with him on LinkedIn. And so just a last quick update that I wanted to give you. Again, thank you so much for listening to this episode and this conversation with Jim Marshall. Let me know what you think of that episode. And one of the things that I have coming up with MetaFit MetaMind and MetaFit MetaMind Academy as the first cohort of the hypnosis certification training teaches you about becoming aware, actually, about your conscious, your unconscious, that responsibility, where there may be disconnect, and just go deeper in, right, with being able to meditate. Jim mentioned about meditation. So If you have any questions on that, let me know. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel so you can get all the updates on new episode. And if you're listening to it on any of the platforms that you listen to, make sure to subscribe to it, follow the podcast, leave a comment, leave a review, because it always helps me to continue to have these episodes out and show up and just continue to be heard by others who may need to listen to these episodes. So thank you so much for listening to this episode up to this point. My name is Carla Rodriguez. This is MetaFit MetaMind podcast, where we're having conversations that we would have never had. Until next time. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. Remember, the conversations we have here are meant to spark growth, connection, and awareness that you can bring into your own journey. If you love this episode, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share with someone who needs to hear this message. Remember, follow the podcast on Instagram at MetaFit MetaMind Podcast. Connect with me on my other page at Coach Carlita, and now on TikTok at Coach Carlita as well, where I share different content on mindset, communication, health, and all the things a little more personal. Until next time, keep raising your voice and share your story.